G'day ladies and gents, and welcome back to IL-2 Stromovik, the Battle of Stalingrad, or this time the Battle of Moscow. Today we're going to be taking a look at the first of 3 aircraft added in a recent patch. I've been a little bit behind on being able to get to these planes. They have been in game for a couple of weeks now. But the first plane we're looking at is the 109F-2. So, before we go too deep into the performance of this aircraft in Battle of Stalingrad, Battle of Moscow, a little bit of history on the plane first. The F-2 is a bit of an interesting design, as it's sort of a hybrid between the old E-Series and the newer F-Series of fighters at its time of changeover. The 109 F-Series airframe was a significant upgrade on the earlier E-Series. A lot of the sharp angles had been removed, the aircraft had been streamlined for better aerodynamics. The core areas of change were around the prop hub, the engine cowling, the shape of the wings, along with the vertical stabilizer and the elevators. A less noticed change was the way the cockpit and the fuselage flushed together. The subframe of the aircraft also received some significant changes. This led to a far more robust airframe, capable of taking a lot more punishment and resistant to a lot more forces during flight. Overall, the changes that were made from the E to the F series were loved by pilots, and it was a massive step in the evolution of the Messerschmitt 109. Unfortunately, there was one problem with the aircraft, and that was the power plant. The F-Series airframe was designed to run with the DB601E power plant. Unfortunately, at the time the airframe was in production and the aircraft was ready to go into service, 601Es were not available in large enough numbers to service a full production run of these new fighters. And in fact, they wouldn't be available in large enough numbers until the production of the Bf 109F4. This engine shortage necessitated the use of the DB601N, the same engine used in the last of the E-Series, specifically the E7. While the overall performance of this particular power plant was only around 170 horsepower, less than the one that was intended, there were a few other changes with the engine which necessitated using a slightly different prop on the F2 than the F2 was originally designed for. While the overall performance of the F2 was exceptional and very much liked by its pilots, the change in engine and the change in prop hub meant the aircraft was slower and accelerated at a lower rate than was intended at low altitudes, as did its intended performance at high altitudes. The Bf 109 F2 was also a changing in the guard in regards to primary armament. Past variants of the 109, specifically the E-Series, featured 20mm MG FFM cannons. This included the first of the 109 F-Series, the F1. However, the F2 featured a newer 15mm MG151 cannon with 200 rounds of ammunition. While this new 15mm cannon did pack less punch per round than previous 20mm variants, its position in the prop hub, its extremely favourable velocity, as well as its larger ammunition load, made it popular amongst pilots. Having said that, many F2s were modified in the field to feature the newer 20mm MG151 when it became available. Overall, the F2 had a pretty large production run with around 1,400 aircraft made in total, and many of those aircraft served well beyond their production life, with a number of F2s not only having 20mm MG151 cannons retrofit into the airframe, but a number of F2s also had a DB601E fitted in the field and had an F4 prop hub fitted out of spare parts, essentially converting the F2 into an F4. So with the history of the F2 covered, now, how does it fly in Battle of Stalingrad? Well, this is a plane that I have a couple of issues with. One of them is something that hopefully should be fixed in short order, but is frustrating to begin with. But first, let's talk about flight performance. The F2 flies incredibly well. It's a very stable aircraft. It feels significantly heavier than the E-Series that came before it. However, it feels much more controllable than the F4. The F4 into the G-Series 109s are known to be twitchy, especially in high angle of attack maneuvers. I found that the F2 was far more stable in flight. It was far easier to control. It was also incredibly easy to recover from a stall situation or from a flat spin. Providing you go full rudder on the initial throttle up on takeoff, it's also incredibly easy to get off the ground. Very stable. Once you've got it up to speed, it doesn't wander too much on the runway. It's very easy to keep in line with very little control input from the rudder itself. In flight, it features an excellent rate of climb, good energy retention, its dive performance is excellent. It is very heavy on the rolls, I noticed, and does have a tendency to lean right more than most of the 109s that I've flown in the past. However, that's easy enough to counter out. Elevator and rudder authority are again very good, very easy to control. The aircraft is quite beautiful to fly. I'm very much a fan of my early E series when it comes to flight, but the F2 might be the easiest of the 109s that I've flown so far. And with most of its systems management being automatic, just like the later F4, this is probably the 109 that I would recommend for a new pilot to learn to fly. It's very easy, it's very forgiving. You almost have to go out of your way to mess up in this plane, and then if you do happen to mess it up, it's fairly easy to bring it back into controlled flight, providing you've got a little bit of altitude underneath you. I was recovering from flat spins at under 500 meters and able to easily pull the aircraft out without running the risk of hitting the trees. So, if the flight performance is fantastic, where's the problem with the F2? And unfortunately, this is a pretty major downside. It's in the guns. Now, there are two problems. One, I am pretty sure, is a bug at the moment. The other one is, I think it's going to be the nature of this aircraft's 15mm cannon. So, first, the bug. The 109F-2 in Battle of Stalingrad, Battle of Moscow, can be field modded, much like every other aircraft in the game. And one of those field modifications is to change the MG151 15mm with its 200 rounds of ammunition over to an MG151 20mm. Now the 151-20 only has, historically, 60 rounds of ammunition. So imagine my surprise right before this match, fitting the 20mm cannon to the aircraft and finding it still had 200 rounds of ammunition. Now, this sounds like a bug in favour of the aircraft, but in actual fact it's not. After flying the first couple of battles that I did in this plane with the 15mm, I found its overall performance was subpar. The shells simply didn't do enough damage. I could easily empty half or more of my ammunition load into a single fighter like a P-40 or like one of the MiG-3s that you're seeing here, before it would finally go down. I actually did a test flight against a Peshka, and I activated all of the smart aiming assist and all the crap that you can add in the game, just to make sure my shots were pinpoint and I wasn't missing, and a Peshka was able to absorb all 200 rounds of ammunition and then continue flying for 5 minutes before its engines finally failed and it went into the ground. It absorbed every single round that this plane had. It's almost like the 15mm don't have any of their explosive loads modelled, and they're just acting like a 15mm machine gun. So unless you're an absolute sniper and you're able to put these rounds straight through the cockpit, the 15mm is not good enough. So back to what I was discussing before, you have the option to switch over to the 20mm, and I did that, and I still had 200 rounds of ammunition, which is odd because I should only have 60. Take it into this flight and I find that it's still got the 15mm. At the moment, whether you have the 20mm selected or not is absolutely irrelevant. You go into combat with the 15mm at all times, which means you're constantly flying an aircraft that simply doesn't have the firepower to deal with a lot of the aircraft that it's going to be encountering, and when you do get your guns on target, you're going to have to hold them there for a long time in order to make what firepower you do have an effect. Which is all well and good when you're chasing AI around the sky, but when you're trying to engage another player in multiplayer, that is a problem. If you go back and pause at the moment where I killed the first MiG-3 in this video, and you look just to the left-hand side of the gun sight, you'll see the ammunition counters. The center one is cannon, the outside are machine guns. You'll notice that it took over half of my machine gun ammo and 2/3 of my cannon ammunition to finally put that MiG-3 down. And I didn't suffer a huge amount of misses overall. Most of my shots were on target. They just didn't do anything. Well, that's going to repeat itself here engaging this second MiG-3. In fact, he's going to survive. I don't have enough ammo to kill him. So, once the bug is fixed and I'm able to fit a 20mm MG151 to the F2, I think its performance will be quite good. The 20mm are a very, very good gun. I love them on the F4, I love them on the G2. The F2 is just going to be more of the same. It's going to be a very nice, very easy to fly aircraft with an exceptionally good gun, and I think it will perform very, very well in combat. However, why did bug prevent you from fitting that 20mm and you're stuck with the 15mm? I can't recommend the plane outside of learning how to fly a 109. In combat, you would be better taking either the E7 or the F4. Either aircraft is a better choice. You'll have guns that are vastly more effective. And that's something that I don't think is going to change. It's well known in Battle of Stalingrad, Battle of Moscow, that the 20mm are not putting out the kind of damage that would be expected from this kind of a gun, especially not something that is loaded with mine shot. It has been a constant complaint that's been largely ignored since the game was released. Now we have the 15mm in play, and it appears we have exactly the same problem. with the explosives being modelled in much weaker amounts, which results in the 15mm MG151 being noticeably worse due to the individual shell having so much less mass overall. So even once the explosive is taken out of the equation, the round is applying so little kinetic force in comparison to the 20mm that it's just not punching the planes down hard enough. So ladies and gentlemen, that is the Messerschmitt 109F-2 in IL-2 Battle of Moscow. An exceptional plane to fly, but just lacking completely in the firepower department. Stay tuned as I'll be going over the IL-2 1941 and the Peshka that were added also in the same patch as the F2 in the very near future, and hopefully we aren't far away from seeing the Ju-88 also coming into the game, and that's a plane that I'm really looking forward to taking out. Anyways, ladies and gents, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching. Click like if you do, subscribe if you want to see more. Fly smart, fly safe, and I'll catch you in the skies.